Hey everyone, I am here with Rajiv Sinclair from Public Data Works, who has been building a fascinating project at the intersection of data journalism and modern AI, which I could not be more excited about. And Rajiv's going to talk us through the project, how it works, how he built it, and give us a really cool demo of what's possible using these modern AI tools in the field that he works in. So yeah, Rajiv, please introduce yourself and show us Project Verdad.
Hey, Simon. Great to be here, and I'm super excited to show you what we've been working on. We are right now recording audio, streaming live from radio stations across the US, transcribing the audio, running audio through multimodal LLMs, analyzing it, picking out little snippets of what sounds like mis or disinformation potentially, and then displaying it in a front end where journalists and researchers and anyone can come to Verdad.app and see individual snippets, add their own custom labels, and add comments, chat with each other about individual snippets. And then we're hoping to create a continuous loop where we're actually able to use their input to help us improve the process that we're using to identify snippets. So let's pull up the site. Here's verdad.app. After you've logged in, you can see a stream of individual snippets. These have been identified automatically, and also you can see other users have upvoted them in order to reinforce some of the specific labels that we've automatically applied, or added a custom label. In this case, is word socialism. You can add an existing label or add a custom label.
And how much data is in here? How many hours of audio are we looking at?
So we've processed through about 50,000 hours. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that's not true. We've recorded 50,000 hours so far, and we've been waiting to get funding so that we can actually process all of it. Right now, we're processing about 1,000 hours a day going forward. And once we are ready to go through the whole backlog, which hopefully will be very, very soon, we'll be able to extract snippets from audio that's been recorded from radio stations going back to the election between Harris and Trump. So that's about a month worth of audio we've got so far. And most importantly, we're recording everything going forward as well. And what we've pulled out from the audio is several thousand snippets that we've identified using a pretty long and nuanced prompt, or a series of prompts in a pipeline, to actually analyze what sounds like it might be mis or disinformation, and then explain why it sounds like it might be mis or disinformation, as well as giving confidence scores, proposing specific labels that seem like they might represent the specific types of mis or disinformation that are being discussed in that snippet, and also an approximate political spectrum or political leaning for any given particular chunk. So we're able to filter there and pick out snippets that represent kind of the left end of the spectrum, things that didn't really get much of a political leaning score, and then right end of the spectrum, as well as center right and center left.
Wow. And so the pipeline here, you're starting with, like, are you streaming MP3s directly from radio stations' websites?
So we have a few different stages, and we're starting with just capturing the audio. So there are two types of audio capture that we do. One of them is very efficient, and the other one is a little bit more costly. The one that you were describing is what we just call audio recording. And this, as you were saying, it just goes to one of our, or each of the MP3 radio streams that most online radio stations make available. And it downloads it in a 30-second chunk, and then saves that 30-second chunk as a file.
And workflow tool that you're using here?
Oh, what we're looking at right here is called Prefect, and it's how we run all of our different types of jobs. So what we're looking at here is called Prefect. It's open source. They also have a managed cloud service as well. And we have two separate flows for recording audio. One of them we just call audio recording. And this is doing what you just described. It's going to a pretty standard MP3 stream online and recording a 30-minute chunk, saving it into cloud storage on Cloudflare R2, and then starting again, making another 30-minute chunk. And we're doing that over and over and over again for 48 or I think 42 stations doing this. And then we've got another set of stations where we use what we're, for whatever reason, calling generic audio recording, which means we have to run a instance of headless Chrome on a cloud machine somewhere to actually play back the audio and then capture the audio stream that comes out of that web browser and then save that into a 30-minute chunk, which, as you might imagine, somehow playing back audio ends up consuming about a gigabyte of memory.
Wow. And that's Cloudflare R2 is effectively R2 is effectively S3, but a little bit cheaper, right?
That is correct. Yeah, a little bit cheaper, no egress cost as well if you want to migrate off of it.
Nice.
And otherwise, yeah, functionally the same APIs, and it's Cloudflare on the back end, which is fantastic. So those are our two audio recording flows. There's audio recording, which is just capturing the MP3 stream, and there's generic audio recording, which is spinning up a headless browser and opening a website that lets you play audio in the website, but doesn't let you grab an audio stream from it, and then playing back that audio and saving it to disk, and then creating a 30-minute chunk and then uploading it into our storage.
How long did it take to get the headless Chrome thing working? That sounds very fiddly.
I mean, when we started this project, it was kind of a mad dash to get everything started and to like start recording as soon as possible, because we knew the one thing we would not be able to do is go back in time and record things that we hadn't recorded yet. So we definitely right away started to get the easy things done. And then after we got enough stability there, we spent, I think, another probably a few days at least, just fiddling around trying to get Chrome to do it stable, do it in a way that's stable. You would think that you don't need a whole cloud machine with a gigabit of RAM just to open one web browser window and play some radio, but it turns out you do. And if you don't give it enough RAM, it crashes. And if it crashes,
You've lost your stream. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a little bit of a loop in there that makes sure that if it's crashing, it's gonna get restarted and gives us a little bit of notification. But the simple solution is we just give it a frankly unreasonable amount of RAM, and then it seems to work pretty reliably.
Gotcha. So that's the audio capture. So you've got your MP3, your half-hour MP3 chunks in R2 somewhere. What's the step after that? How do you start turning those into transcripts?
So we've been through a few different iterations on what we do with the audio as soon as we've got it. The current version of it, what we're doing is taking the audio file and pushing it through Gemini Flash. So this is our initial disinformation detection phase. The very, very first thing it does is it's just getting a transcript from it. And earlier on, we were really excited about, well, if we're asking an LLM to transcribe it, why don't we just ask it to also give us some really nice information about it? So we started asking it to give us more metadata. We started asking it to give us like its own little opinions about whether or not it thought it had mis or disinformation inside of it. And we found out pretty quickly that yes, Gemini family in general is quite capable, and Gemini Pro does those things really, really well. If you try and get Gemini Flash to do too many things at all at the same time, it gets overwhelmed and starts giving you a bit of junk.
Ouch. Yeah. I mean, but Flash, it's unbelievably inexpensive, right? Like I've been playing with it and it cost me less than a cent to do things against like 7 minutes of audio. So presumably the costs of running Flash against even thousands of hours a day aren't prohibitively expensive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're very right. Flash is a dream when it comes to saving money, and it handles multimodal audio very, very effectively. And we do still have to incorporate Whisper later on down the pipeline, but one of our really early goals when it came to optimizing this was to not have to run all of the audio through Whisper, because Whisper, whether you get it from OpenAI or someone else, or you run it locally, it ends up being a bit costly. And Gemini 1.5 Flash is very, very cost effective. And if you tell it what to do in a straightforward enough way, it'll do it. And it'll do it pretty reliably, including with multimodal input like audio input. So we use Gemini 1.5 Flash to transcribe. And that transcript then flows into Gemini 1.5 Pro, which does what we call disinformation detection. And this is a very preliminary level. Sorry, did I
And
cut you off?
and these are mostly Spanish language stations, is that right? So are you transcribing directly the Spanish? Is that at what point are you doing a translation from Spanish into English?
Yeah, we do translation a lot later on in our pipeline. We're really just trying to capture what was said at first,
Right.
and
That
all of
makes
these
sense to me. That the last thing you want
LLMs.
is you don't want the translation step losing some of that important context. Yeah, like that putting that later makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So for a long time, we were, trying to keep even not just Spanish language, but audio as the thing that we were asking Gemini to process. Instead of doing a transcript and asking it to process the transcript, we were saying, "Oh, let's just keep the audio through the pipeline."
Hmm.
And that sounded great. Until we realized that, especially when you're talking about these 30-minute audio chunks, one, it does end up consuming more tokens than the text equivalent, and also it tends to be a little bit more overwhelming at that scale, especially. So it is more easily confused.
Gotcha.
So we found that we actually had better results getting Gemini Flash just to turn the audio into Spanish language or original language text transcript, and then passing that text of everything that was said during that 30-minute chunk onto Gemini 1.5 Pro and asking Gemini 1.5 Pro to see if it can find anything in there that matches with our heuristics and that we can classify as potential mis or disinformation.
Gotcha. So we're at 3 steps already, right? We've got the downloading of the audio. We've got the audio through Flash to get the Spanish language transcript. We've got the Spanish language transcript through Gemini Pro to identify potential misinformation. And you mentioned Whisper as well. So is there a 4th step that's happening?
Yeah, I guess when you count it, it does start adding up, doesn't it? So yeah, at that point, we have still just been working with a whole 30-minute chunk. And what we really want to do is we want to start focusing in on what's actually a significant moment during that 30-minute chunk. And we want to stop, we don't want our LLMs to be spending lots and lots of time. We don't want, like, especially sophisticated LLMs to be spending lots and lots of time processing and reprocessing the entirety of all the audio that we record.
Right. Some of which
Instead, we want
are still relevant to what you're looking for.
Yeah. And that work we're doing right now at Gemini 1.5 Pro, looking at the text that came out of Gemini 1.5 Flash when it just did the transcription. And Gemini 1.5 Pro does a pretty good job of identifying within the text that it's reading, based on our heuristics, here are some specific moments that sound like mis or disinformation. And the thing that it doesn't do, neither Gemini 1.5 Flash nor Gemini 1.5 Pro are capable of accurately giving timestamps.
Oh, that's so disappointing. And
Something was actually
presumably
said.
you want the timestamps because that means that you can have a play button. You can say, click here to listen to that audio. But if you haven't got accurate timestamps, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah, we want it for the from the user's perspective as well, but we also want it so we can make that narrowed down clip.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So for that reason, and for that reason alone, we take the audio again and run it through. If Gemini 1.5 Pro says, yeah, there's something in here that's worth looking at, we then run that audio through Whisper. So that whole process we've been to just now is kind of like a screening process, just to see, in this 30-minute chunk, is there anything that might be worth looking at?
Wow. That, and so you use the inexpensive models for that, and then that narrows you down to the bits that you can then throw Whisper in. And then the Whisper transcript, are you running that through Gemini 1.5 Pro again once you've got the sort of official Whisper version?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Gemini 1.5 Pro again looks at the transcript that came out of Whisper that time, which now has timestamps that are reliable, and uses that to say, okay, yes, here's that moment of mis or disinformation that we identified before, and here's the timestamps for when it actually occurred in the audio clip. And now we're going to read that text from the transcript, and we're going to generate as a separate process an audio clip of that moment from the audio file originally, plus a little bit of buffer. Right now we're doing 90 seconds before and 30 seconds after, but that's also definitely subject to some experimentation and optimization these days. And we create that audio clip, and now we have something that's really worth focusing on.
I think we should talk about your prompts. I would love to see the prompts that you're using and learn a bit more about how you iterated on those and got them to the point that they are now.
I'd love to show you our prompts, and all of our prompts and all of the code for our pipeline and everything are all open source in a public GitHub repo. I'll pull it up right now. Here in GitHub, you're looking at Markdown. This is what it actually looks like, and it's going to get pulled into our pipeline. These are very long, so we're not going to want to run through the entirety of it. This is literally 1,000 lines. This is our biggest prompt. And
that's the first prompt, the Gemini Flash, the Gemini Pro prompt that acts against the transcript from Flash, right?
No, sorry, this is our last prompt. Stage 3. And this is why when you started counting up the stages, I realized it adds up to quite a bit. Stage 3 analysis is what we actually call our very final stage. Earlier on, we're doing a much more simple prompt, basically just saying you can transcribe audio, and you can output it in a JSON schema to us.
Gotcha. If you click the raw button, it should wrap the text, I think.
Great. So this is a pretty straightforward prompt, and it's really just what we do at the very, very beginning to just produce some audio, to produce some transcript of the audio. We give a little bit of an example of what the output should look like. We give a very clear JSON schema. Of course, for everything in our pipeline, we're using structured output. And fortunately, Gemini is pretty effective at forcing itself to produce output that conforms to your JSON schema, and that enables, pipelines to work.
The dialects and accents section down there looks super interesting, and cultural sensitivity.
Yeah, these came through a little bit of back and forth with O1 Preview and Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which helped us write all of our prompts.
Interesting.
None of these have actually been written word by word by hand. They're the outcome from a lot of back and forth between me and a bunch of different LLMs. And the LLMs have a bunch of context about what we're doing on this project and what the specific stage needs to do and what the limitations that we've discovered about that particular LLM or the LLM that we're going to run that prompt through have. And we've also done some experimentation with it and said, like, oh, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And that's how we ended up coming up with these specific prompts. And again, this is just the simplest one for that very, very first stage. And I'll pull up, well, I guess we can go through them one by one. So that's the transcript. And then we pass it on to Pro, which is now going to do the very, very first round of analysis. So it's taking the audio. Oh, actually, notice we have we're taking the transcript, that was transcribed by Gemini 1.5 Flash. And from it, we're asking it to now fill in this JSON schema.
Wow.
Oh, this actually may be one stage further on.
That one was mentioning timestamp, so I'm assuming that one was.
Exactly. That's actually what you were referring to as stage 3. Here's the one I was looking for before. This is what we do with the text that comes out of Gemini 1.5 Flash for the transcript. So we take that transcript, we give it to Gemini 1.5 Pro along with this set of instructions, and we ask it to review these heuristics. And these also we generated, together with O1 Preview and Sonnet 3.5, based on a lot of different examples and definitions of themes. It's not meant to be specific exclusively to Spanish and Arabic, but we did want to use as much, we wanted to include as many examples as we could, and to include examples of different types of phrases that are used, specifically phrases that are likely to be used on the radio. So in the prompt that we use to generate these we're specifically instructing it to take into consideration that this is going to be looking at audio as transcribed from radio streams, and specifically radio streams that are broadcast to audiences who are primarily immigrant communities. And we gave the example of Spanish and Arabic, and we asked it to specifically come up with phrases that were likely to be used, likely to show up on the radio specifically.
Wow. So
And
this is O1 Preview helping you construct the prompts for Gemini 1.5 Pro.
that's exactly right. Yep.
Fascinating.
It's a combination of O1 Preview and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I don't want to short sell Claude. It's Claude's role in putting together these prompts.
And in terms of testing, like how much time did you spend knocking out a new version of the prompt and then running some audio against it and sort of eyeballing the results and seeing if it looked like it was an improvement?
Weeks.
That's the work, right? That's the fundamentally
Yeah.
this project is about that process.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like we've just barely done the most basic version of that. There's a much more sophisticated world of evals and like big data-driven approaches to optimizing your prompts and optimizing your pipelines. And every time you make a change, finding out whether or not it's performing better or worse against all your benchmarks.
That is the problem I most want to understand myself. Like, I just want that at a personal level. I want to know if capitalizing part of the instructions gives me better results. And I still don't have a really a robust process for that. I'm inching closer and closer to that. I keep on trying to find that the tooling exists, but it's also young that it's difficult to stay. Okay, this thing, which has been out for 6 months, is definitely going in the right direction as opposed to this thing that came out 2 months ago, But yeah, I find that whole problem space absolutely fascinating.
It is. It's fascinating. And it also points to like one of the most, I guess you could say, interesting dynamics of this whole space, which is having high quality data that you can not just train on, but that you can test on is incredibly important if you want to have a workflow that enables you to really optimize and like get better.
So let's talk about that piece then. So we've seen the process, we've seen the prompts. The next part has to be the application itself, right? You've got this back end, you've got a back end and a front end and a team of people who are helping with that labeling. I'd love to get a feeling for how you built that and how that system works.
Yeah, so we built out a front end app, pretty lightweight and straightforward, that anyone can use. They can come to Verdad.app. They can sign up with their email address or with signing with Google if they want, and they can see right away the stream of individual snippets. We show them by default in English, unless your browser is in Spanish already. And you can switch to Spanish, in which case we'll show you not just an interface in Spanish, but also Spanish titles for each one of these,
Nice.
Spanish summaries.
Are those summaries being generated by Gemini Flash?
No, these are Pro.
Those are Pro. Gotcha. Okay.
Flash is really only giving us a transcript at this point. We had, earlier versions of our pipeline. We were using Flash to try and do some of this work, and we deeply regretted it. So now that work is done by Gemini Pro. So what we're showing actually in the interface is a summary and an explanation. We also have a title further upstream or further up in this prompt that is just a short title. But the summary here is intended to give us a summary of what's being said in it. And we've got further instructions later right down in this prompt that remind it how important it is to be objective and to try not to introduce any bias in the process of generating the summary. And then we have an explanation where the LLM is now being asked to explain its justification. And we also ask it to give a confidence score, of course, but really important part of this is to ask the LLM to explain its thinking and to try to make that as transparent as we can. So we show that information directly in the Verdad app, and you can see for each individual snippet, there's the summary, there's the title up top, and then we've got an explanation of why it was flagged.
Gotcha. And have you caught the models making like outrageous mistakes in this, or do they tend to have quite good judgment for this particular set of tasks?
I would say these days it's doing a pretty good job, honestly. And I think it's, you know, I think the truth is that it's getting a lot of instructions from us on what to do and what not
The
to
prompts are
do.
enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, and those instructions are I'm impressed by how well it's able to follow the instructions, and really understand the level of nuance, the level of objectivity, and the intention of the project as
I
well.
think one of the things I love about this is because it's so transparent, because everything comes down to transcripts and you can click play and hear the original audio, that feels like that's a very responsible way of applying these tools where if they do hallucinate, if they make mistakes, we've at least got a fighting chance of understanding what's actually going on. That feels like a really well thought out piece of design to me.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that was really important to us from the beginning. Is we know journalists. We work together with journalists on all sorts of different projects, and we also know what the discourse around AI is like these days. And even if you ignore that whole dimension of it, the discourse around AI, journalists need to be able to get to the source, and they need to be able to verify something for themselves. And that's why, one, we're trying to make it easy by adding translation wherever possible, and we're also trying to make it as raw as possible. So we've got the audio from that. I think this is actually a good example of a false of mistaken detection just now. This is, you know, running and pulling in new snippets just as we're talking. And here it's saying that someone is falsely claiming a Trump victory.
Oh,
And
wow. This is a light. Is there a timestamp on that? When did that come in?
yeah, this is 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes
That's
ago.
fascinating. This is the models have a very solid baked-in bias that the election has not happened yet, right? So, oh,
Right.
that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's today, and you know, going forward, we're going to be encountering a lot more of that specific problem.
You're going to have to update your system prompts to say, no, really, this is the thing that happened. Oh, that's so interesting. Wow. So what's next for this project? What are the things that are still on your plate in terms of like scaling this up and building out new features for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are so many. um, I think that one of the things we want to get a lot better at is iterating based on user input. So as people are using Verdad.app and adding labels to individual snippets, creating labels themselves or upvoting the existing labels, we want to make sure that we're using that data en masse to refine our heuristics that are going into those prompts. And our plan is to use an LLM process that will review all of the upvotes and the labels that are added and the comments as well that are added, and use that to generate some proposals for us for changes that we should make to our prompt.
Like I've seen that with larger prompts, one of the most powerful ways you can impact them is through examples and using LLMs to help pick out the right combination of examples to get the best results. That appears to be a sort of prompt optimization technique that's working really well. I think as it there's a project standard DSpy, I think, does exactly that, and that's
Oh
got
yeah.
pretty solid
Mhm.
reputation. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's also still just the earliest version of an idea at this point. So
It
uh,
certainly doesn't look like it. Like this isn't feeling like that sort of first proof of concept at this point.
that's kind of you to say. Definitely, when it comes to the whole layer of optimization, that's something that we've been doing by hand so far, and we prompt AI in the process of making those optimizations, but we're doing all that by hand so far. Coming up with a way to turn that into an automated flow and to like ingest user input continuously and to figure out what the batches are and to make sure that when it's making proposals to change our prompt, we're able to review those proposals efficiently and those proposals are actually legitimately useful. That's definitely something that we've got a lot of experimentation to do still. But that's definitely one of the next big things on the back end, is to make sure that we're getting better and to be using all of the information that comes from people from experts who are using Verdad.app to make sure that we're getting better accurately. And then I think there's a whole other world of features that we wanted to include that we didn't have time to include in terms of like full text search. That would be a great one, obviously. And also related snippets. You know, when you're looking at an individual instance of suspected mis or disinformation, let's get some semantic vector similarity going and see what other snippets have similar themes in them.
And so I have to ask, because I'm a total data nerd like this, are you going to be releasing any of the data itself? Because the raw data here has my antennas twitching at all of the exciting things that could be done with that as well.
Well, most of the data that are going into this flow are not really ours to treat as proprietary, in my opinion. You know, most of the data are things that were said on the radio.
Yep.
And at best, things that were said on the radio, and then we might have done some curation on it. So I guess your question is, are we going to release to everyone raw access to all the audio? It sounds like a lot of bandwidth. You know, we've got like a terabyte going right now, and actually more than that. So we're not going to have like a download button for download all of our raw audio. Definitely, we're working together with and eager to work together with more researchers and journalists and academics and whoever is actually legitimately interested in working on this and sharing raw recordings. That's absolutely something we're happy to do, and all the intermediate stuff as well. There's nothing proprietary about it. The transcriptions, I don't see why we would hold that back. We already made the prompts available, and the outputs of those prompts, why would we ask other people to pay to run them again? So happily, we're going to be able to share all of that. And is there anything that we cannot share? Oh, well, so I guess we brought up this topic once I started talking about user input. And we haven't really thought about that decision yet.
Right. The tags and the comments are attached to individuals who may not want their data like shared as part of the overall corpus, I guess.
Yeah. So that's the only maybe. But everything else is not one download away, but we're happy to share it, and it's reproducible as well.
And if people want to know more about this and your other projects, where should they go? Like, how should people follow along and potentially even get involved if there are ways they can collaborate with you?
Absolutely. We're always eager to open our arms to new collaborators. We are Public Data Works. Our website is pdw.co or publicdata.works. Both of those domains work. Sorry to confuse things. And you can see our past projects there. You can reach out to us there. And you can also email us specifically around this project by emailing help@verdad.app. And that'll come through to me and a couple of my coworkers. And we're always happy to have conversations, learn more about what you're doing, and chat about what's next.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Like I said earlier, this is the absolute intersection of the things that I find most interesting in the world: the data journalism, modern AI tools, the way you're responsibly using them to help, to help journalists consume information from thousands of hours a day of audio. I think this is the sort of best possible use case of this technology. So thanks a lot. This has been really fun.
Thanks, Simon. I'm really glad I got a chance to talk with you today.